Hi, I'm here, but I am waiting till it says one. It's 1 o'clock. Hi, I'd like to welcome you all. Okay, Natanako Aste Nikiwa. I'd like to welcome you to the Native Wellness Power Hour today. And my name is Lori Newbreast. I am coming from the little portal, the cyber portal from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation in Montana. And today I just want to say I'm happy that you all are here. It doesn't matter what age you are. This is open to everybody. It's really just um, when this Facebook was asking me to put like kind of what this is about. I think the theme for today is Indians are ageless, or Niswiktipi are ageless. We never go out of style, and we're eternal. We're eternal thinking people that we think far into the future. We think far into the past, the legacy of our ancestors, the creator's vision when he brought us to wherever we are, whatever culture we belong to, whatever place on earth. We think of all those things, but we also are in the moment. So today, I've been thinking about this, like what I would like to share with people, and really just be mindful. I listen to Uncle Joe or President Biden, and to be mindful that during this time, during the pandemic, that there have been a lot of folks that have been touched in many, many, many different ways. Good, bad, scratchy, otherwise fantastic. But that many of the people have walked on from COVID-19. But also that in Indian country, we continue to lose people, or we don't lose them, they begin to walk in another way in the spirit world. But from those things that challenge us, we all know the challenges in our communities. And if you are, regardless of your age, you know, if you are walking a road that you begin to see friends, companions, acquaintances, that you are walking further and further. You see the passage of friends and other people, family members. You hear of, the passing of people. I think it's really um, comforting, but also to know you are really not alone. You are never alone in this experience that we're living as a living generation. There are always prayers that our lives are being carried on, that were said long before we ever came to be born. And that as we mark this, a lot of people are saying it's a year according to the Gregorian calendar. But for Indian country or indigenous communities, this is going to be an episode in our cultural way of life, in our wellness journeys. This is an episode. And like any episode or any good story, like the traditional stories that always have, you know, we all come from cultures where people talked, you dialogued, you communicated, you had conversation. And the culture was carried throughout the generations and throughout time on story. So we are in an episode. This is not the end game for any of our communities. This is not the end game. If you are listening today, for you, your story will continue. And so those of you that have seen me on the Power Hour before, I call it, thank goodness for family and the telephone. It's not like I have to run, and like in the ancient past, I'd have to run, you know, 45 miles, 50 miles to get a message. I just pick up the phone. So I had called up my mom and my sister, and I said, quick, I need to answer a question. What's good about being this age? And so one of the things that was shared with me is this thought: the longer you live, the more you know yourself. And like an inner core of honesty with yourself. And I think that is really, with all the stuff that we've inherited being born the living generation, the challenges, the good things, the positive things, the skills, the magnitude of our strength as Indigenous people, all of those, the more we move forward as who we really are, the more, in the modern language, inclusive we are. Take our parts of our culture that have been in the shadows, so that again, the people in our cultures can experience them fully. I think that those are lessons that have come down through time, because we've always, the cultures are set up, and are the ones I'm familiar with, and I'll speak from the one I'm from. They're set up for that honesty, to know yourself. And as we move through this period in living generation, where we're working on wellness, not decolonizing, yes, that's an action, but really we're creating space so that our realness goes beyond our individual selves. Because I think part of the wisdom from this episode we're in the pandemic, is that we all share connection on this planet. We all breathe air. We need good air. And we also see that the harm, the turbulence of the last year, and in the United States, but all over the world, where cultures are not tolerated, or people from individual cultures and societies, segments of societies, have been the targets of violence, or have been the targets of further marginalization. One of the things, I kind of had a shudder moment last night, where when I heard that, this prospect of holding up July 4th as a day that we would mark the end of the pandemic. Yes, we must think about that in the geographies we live in. But to know that what my ancestors would have celebrated, and they would have celebrated when they knew that all Indigenous communities and all people, regardless if they live our beliefs, our way of life, that all people would be protected from this episodical virus, COVID-19. And so when you become like many of us in the living generation, there are many in this geography of the United States and the territories, there are many cultures that their people physically are no longer here in this living generation. And to carry the bundle of the spirit of life, to acknowledge that maybe every place you travel, you cannot acknowledge a living culture or a people of a culture, but it is indigenous land wherever you go. It was somebody's home. And after, people break loose again, because Indians love to travel. So, tune up your car now. Please don't be riding on a donut to the first in-person powwow. Or if that's how you got to get there, get there. Then have a blanket dance and we'll buy you a new tire. But as we move forward through this time, that we do not lose that nugget of wisdom that's come from this episode. It's a refresher that we are collectively connected, not only to the universe, to all the beings, the living beings, the underwater spirits, the ground spirits. Not only are we connected to that, the spirit of the land itself, the elements that make up the earth, because it is a living place. It is a dynamic environment, that we really hold that close. And for those bundles of the spirit of life that we are going to carry forward, that there is a celebration and responsibility. There is a skill in acknowledging that trust that has come to the living generation through time, that we are trusted by the ancestors. We are trusted by other people in the world that we will never know. We may never have, a latte at that big franchise, They might be there in spirit. And I think that there is a great need for celebration. And because to acknowledge in a celebratory way, I had many experiences of being at one form or another, depending on what people call it in their communities, but at giveaways, of gifting, of sharing, of being the recipient of those types of appreciation and celebration of somebody. And we have turned in our community some events that in the past, they damaged us, they injured us, but we were never, if we were driven to our knees, we always got up. Even children had the ability to not only save their own lives or the lives of others, but they had the ability in their strength to go forward as the person they were born to be. So yes, this episode has taken a lot of conveniences and comforts and good times, and it's introduced this medium. So my thought that I wanted to share about wellness, I've kind of been through in my own family, the healing from all the challenges, the understanding and the compassion that comes from healing, when understanding that your parents' experience is not your experience, but there might have been a legacy. If it was through the boarding schools, if it was that they were, maybe plucked from their family in some way. But there's also that other part, that really the wellness movement among Indigenous people worldwide, because there's there'll be a gathering in, I think, 2023, Healing Our Spirits Worldwide, which was a conference a gathering really of Indigenous people worldwide to say that collectively we are giving voice, that we are going to heal what has been done to us, repair, strengthen what has carried us to this point. And so it was like a declaration. So you can see those gatherings. I've had the privilege, I think, of when you live a couple decades, I've had the privilege of being at gatherings where there was no sponsorship, there was no grant. It was people gathered because of somebody's dream in the modern time. And I had heard many times in my life from different people, ceremonialists, from the grandmothers and grandfathers of the culture, you know, that dreaming is incredibly important. So during this episode, every dream you have is part of that. If you want to say, it's that next moccasin print to go forward. And a lot of dreams become really personal. They're specific to people you've known in your life. And then there's dreams that where you are gifted knowledge that can help everybody. An experience, a spark, an idea, an interpretation once you think about that dreaming life that you lead. And through this episode, those are critical. Those are critical to give yourself that time, that acknowledgement, and that nourishment of sleep. And I'm going to see if she's going to quit. My big res dog is outside, so I'm going to let her in. So this is your commercial break. Take a breath, take a sip of water, take a deep breath, and I'll let her out. I mean, let her in. What I want to say about my dog, Nesta, she goes over here, is if she hears me talking, she might think that there's something that she should be a part of. She can't drive, but she travels with me a lot. So in preparing for today, I just want to acknowledge that during your sleeping life, it is important. It is important what happens in your dreams. And that just like every Indian is ageless, every Indian is important. So then I also had thoughts about how, you know, when people gather and they gather in a circle, sometimes it depends on the circumstances, but sometimes they're gathered based upon the gender of their choice. I would say that culturally. Like sometimes there is the protocol for that. And sometimes it is that if they are married, they sit in couples. And sometimes they sit based on experience. And many other ways. You can kind of, you know, it's kind of like the, not musical chairs, it's musical circles. Because sometimes the experience of people does not reflect their chronological age. And during this time, what has happened as a legacy and that we come to an understanding that has happened through what people call like I prefer to call it the historical disruption period we're still in, is more and more of our people do not chronologically live long. We're changing that. But when I was talking with my mom, who's 82, she reminded me that Yokskiptaki, Her name comes from Yokskutaki. And there's an estimate that that woman lived well over 100 years old and was very active. And she was known for her ability to continually move. I won't use the work word because as in our cultures, you move, you take action. It's a living, breathing culture. It's an act of action to be an Indian. And so in that, in thinking about that, there's a responsibility in the living generation now, but regardless of whatever your age you're at, if you're 21 and you don't think that it matters how you behave, just look at the little faces behind you of the people that are maybe in grade school. Or if you've ever been at an Indian basketball game, or the girl, it doesn't matter if it's the girls or boys because they're both magnificent, or a track meet. Those little young eyes track everybody. And sometimes the first superstar in our young children's lives are the family members. So you may not think that you are somebody's role model or hero or even superstar, but you are. And so as you move through time, this is kind of like, I like to squeegee it down because we only got an hour, is that be the role model and demonstrate for the young people how you would like to pass on the behavior. So if you find yourself talking like about the young people don't know this, the young people don't know that, be that model that helps them understand that a definition of aging or moving through time is that you remain teachable, you remain curious. And in this age of technology advancement that we went through, this leapfrog, many people in families get help from the younger people. And then there are many, many grandparents and parents that have had to learn technology to help their children stay in school through the computer or through some other mechanism. In a way, nobody expects to go have your second round of elementary school, but some people have. And they've had the ability to adapt to the technology, to learn all the ins and outs alongside of the licensed teachers and educators. And that is an example during this episode that to remain teachable really means to embrace like the fantastic things in life, that you can you know, this morning on one of the Zoom calls, we were talking about Nathan. I'll have to say Nathan, skateboard, cranberry juice, right? And where even, I was like, oh, they're thinking like Indians. Where even now, non-Indigenous people are saying that was a turning point, like in the U.S. Because let's be frank, we were, you know, we were at a bottom, you know, and just like you get back up. So, but to see that the technologies that are out there, they're like a hammer. Are you going to pick up that hammer to build a house, build a bridge, build the most blinging out I said it, sorry, bad looking, bad in the good way, res dog house? Or are you going to use that hammer to take things apart? So we're at that point where, we had a year, and it's just like uh, we've had seasons now. This is our second spring, our second winter that we're ending and during this episode, and we're getting ready for the second spring. So what do you need to learn? What do you need to remain teachable on? What do you need to start to say, I don't need to do that anymore? That was my old life before the pandemic. February 2020, that was my old life. And what do I maybe need to do? So I was thinking about one time this presentation I heard from one, in the 90s and a little bit in the 2000s, off and on, I taught at the tribal college, or I substituted for somebody in their class. And I had the privilege about 10 years ago of sitting in a workshop and hearing a former student give the presentation. And for me, that was it was like such a beautiful moment, because it helped me too. It helped strengthen me. But this is one of the things he said when he started out his talk. He said, when I got up this morning and I knew I was coming here, and I was excited, but I also knew, I had wondered what I was going to wear, what I was going to say. And he said, I thought back to what his parents, his grandparents had said to him. When you go in front of the people, or you go out to be among the people, you always look the best you can. Doesn't mean that you won every raffle on social media since the beginning of the pandemic, and you have all these shirts and jewelry and stuff, because we do love a raffle. We love a chance at a beautiful object. But he said, I dressed up, and for a very long time he had a suit or pieces of a suit in his closet, but they didn't fit him, so he Indianized it. But he dressed up. He took care of himself, combed his hair, checked himself, because he was going to go out among the people. So if during this time when we were, that term lockdown, I always kind of like, because it doesn't come from our culture. I'm just going to say that. So if you had a visceral reaction every time you heard it, I think that's normal during this episode. But do you need to zhuzh up your physical presentation? Do you need to, maybe your favorite pandemic t-shirt is getting a little holy? Do you need to invest in a new t-shirt? But whatever you do, plan on looking your best, that you are capable of at that moment. And not that you're trying to fake it till you make it. If that day your best is, if you're have long hair, that best is to rebraid your hair. Maybe your braids are getting a little shaggy, and you rebraid it. An act of taking care of yourself. But that has always been part of who we are. At the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, Alberta, one time I was fascinated by this. I seen in one of the display cases a quilled, decorated comb holder. And I thought about that over the years, so that was probably about 25 years ago when I seen it. What does it say about a culture that the thing to hold a comb, to tend to your hair, that it was so important as a possession, or you respected it, they quilled it. They made a case of porcupine quills, a dyed porcupine quills. And I've thought about that a lot at moments when, during this episode, maybe you did want to lay on the couch. That's perfectly acceptable. It's a normal response. But also maybe you were forced before your comfort level to be visible because of your work, or to be your social media. You always can, before, when there was a time lapse between who you really are and who you were online, you could have did all the filters at once. But for some people during this episode, to be seen is not comfortable, because that is that legacy that still has its presence in the living generation, of where to be seen, for our people to be seen at certain times, was met not by support, not by acceptance, but by other responses. And to be seen, to always be on and have that, to be looked at and watched, is real different than when you're in a culture and you're presenting yourself to the people that love you and you love them, and you're participating in a way of life that ensures life. And so if there have been moments when to be visible during the pandemic, that it's caused you, maybe a little heart flutter, maybe, another response, take some work, some control, take a deep breath, because the beauty, for one of the gifts that I believe is our presence, is no longer in doubt because of the ways that we've culturalized this medium, through the social distance powwow, through going online immediately to continue the work of our communities. But also, I was thinking, I was reading this thing about how they were saying, you got to tend to your background. Like, your background has to have a book, has this, and I was like, we might need to indigenize that. So I don't know if somebody needs to have a contest for the most celebratory indigenous background to a video conferencing or a presentation, online presentation. But we have created a lane and an opportunity for many generations to come to be visible. And I just want to say, if you want to just give yourself a little squeeze right now, your face is the most valuable image on the internet, on online community. Your face of the ancestors, the genetics you carry, the story, the legacy. You're the most important image. So yes, you wanna, my t-shirt's clean. It was all wrinkly. I even fess up how many you iron your t-shirts or put them in the dryer and let the dryer faux iron them. We're the most important image. So how you show up on this medium, you've already won when you show up. And I really think that there's a cause for celebration in our communities of how we have responded. And I seen one of the younger people were sharing that for my own people, in terms of our response to COVID-19, there have been many victories, but it's not over. And the need, the desire, the love, the responsibility that brought many good minds together to secure a place for us in the future so that we made it to today. It isn't without loss, but we used collectively, because once they could have put a rule out there and nobody could have complied. But it was that desire that our communities move forward. Yeah, there were a couple of, those Roman Indians that were roaming around the rules. There always are. That's a normal response to the legacy that we've colonization that we've been through. To resist rules is an act of survival for many of our ancestors. That's why we still have what we do today. We learned how to negotiate and be ourselves up to this time. And so when we're talking about, so that's like the big picture, that's like the galactic, not all encompassing, not everything. But I also wanted to talk about because you can find these books like a guide to after a certain age, like a guide, name any age, and you can find a guide of what to expect. But as you changed from a child, as you left diapers behind, you got potty trained, and as your physical body changed, you responded. You began a new chapter in your life or a new episode. And there are things when your physical body, it doesn't mean you still can't do things, you just do them differently. So I was looking for a way to say about the physical part of it, of living through time, is to stay active. If you're in a position, like maybe from circumstances, your flexibility is, not what it used to be, then be the maximum flexible you can. Have that as a goal. And I would say about 15 years ago, I was in this workshop about people that they were concerned. Well, I was one of the presenters. I was in there with, and people were concerned with the health of Indian country, And so I thought, well, I'll ask them. How many of you can put your hands straight over your head? Drop your shoulders. And there's the India, somebody measured it, but upper body strength, you need your whole life as an Indian. Even if you are go into the golden age of the dance category at the powwow, to hold anything in your arms and make it a full lap around the arena, you need upper body strength. But it changes. And that's why we live in a circle environment. That's why the generations that are differently at a different time of moving through time, of age, of capability. That's why there was always intergenerational support. And there are some people that, because it's not too far from here, where my great grandmother Mutsika, that she was well known into her 80s, way past that, to be able to stake out a hide and tan it. And if any of you have ever tried to scrape an animal hide, and that process of washing it and redrying it and changing it to like a garment level, you have to use a lot of strength. And I'm not saying go wrestle a buffalo or a polar bear right this moment, but we need to keep up our physical strength, because your physical strength is directly related to your mind, your ability of your mind to cope, your ability of your mind to function. So if where you start is lifting your arms over your head 10 times throughout a day, then do that. To whatever your ability is to now, do that. But there's also, when you do move through time, and let's say you were a sprint runner, you might need to reformate that and say, today I can still move fast. I'm moving as fast as I am capable. And not always look back. Because I think right now, and we're ending this episode, and we really have to gear up to move forward, to keep moving forward, regardless of what we are experiencing. And when we find good moments or we find funny moments, there is a tendency, sometimes, you do need to stay in those moments. Maybe you need to watch the 70 episodes of, a Korean series. I don't know. Because if that's going to make you happy during the pandemic, during this episode, that is what's going to engage you, all your happy synapses in your brain, then that's the right thing for you. But we also must physically move forward to the end of this episode, or to the pause, to catching our breath. And I don't know if we'll be on July 4th, but hey. So the other thing that I wanted to touch on today, because it is about wellness, is how you give yourself that permission at any age to experiment, to enjoy new things. Now, I think most of the world, and now it's free streaming, so in case you didn't see it, you could catch it. Most of the world seen that movie, The Hunger Games, and what I took away from when I first seen that movie is I'm going to see multicolored hair. And I had, in the early 90s, lived in Italy. And the first, I'm assuming they were Italian ladies, I seen with this dark purple hair. I was like, I'd like to try that. And so if your experimentation with your physical appearance, that's your sovereign right. So if you choose to wear the colors of the rainbow on your hair, or you choose to, maybe I just really like that style where I've seen on a lot of people of all genders, where they kind of have the pompadour, the pomade, the big one. Because it reminds me of when I was a child and I would see some African American men, just how much care they made so that their hair was like this. And it always fascinated me that I wonder how they did that. And so to see people choosing that, that's their right to experiment, to wear their true face, to be who they are. And there's a lot of teachings in a lot of our cultures about the importance of hair. And in all cultures, there were variations. And the culture I come from, there were many, many variations of how you wore your hair. And After the changes that came to the people, and young males started wearing short hair. There was always episodes where the long hair came back. And I want to say that, I've seen pictures of people where in all their life they wore different versions of hair. And some of our people, excuse me, their hair changes. And during the pandemic, the collective experience, part of it is that it can change your hair. It can change how the touch of your hair feels. But I'd like to say there is no right way to wear your hair at any age, because you need to honor your journey. And if we become where there is restriction of people expressing their road, their journey, that should be an indication for all of us in Indigenous cultures that we are not being inclusive. We are adopting another value system. So this is my one serious, not serious, but it's just, what is. So off and on, I was asking people at different points, are elders still important? Not as a concept or, an honorarium recipient, but are they still important? And they would say, yes, all ages, yes, they're important. And so I started thinking about that, because that English word has a lot of connotations. But if we think about the family unit and all the ways that our people gathered, it's more important, or not more important, to, when using English, that those learned people are acknowledged as the grandparents of the culture. So in a circle way of thinking, you have the grandparents, you have the young, outwardly world people, you have the young people developing their abilities. And there are many stories in all cultures of when somebody who has not been on earth or in the living generation very long is gifted a spiritual gift from the Creator that changes the whole people. There are stories. So if you want to say the sacred child, there are those stories. There are stories of how, prior to contact for my people, when the older people were not being treated kindly, but they never gave up. They survived past that unkindness because they went forward as who they are. And so as we're moving through this time, to really start seeing that true equity, we live it when the cultures are, when our values are in sync with our heart and our spirits. And true equity, we knew that because all ages mattered. All the people. And that there were challenges prior to contact when we had to address when unbalance came. And it came through a spiritual solution. So as we go through this episode, and as our second spring is coming during this time, and the people want to gather again, they want to move around, they want to travel, they want to see. I mean, the cyber world is great, the online world is great, all the technology is great. but they want to feel the warmth of a friend, the warmth of a family member, the warmth of a gathering. If you've ever had the privilege to dance in a group among our people, you feel that kinetic, physical energy of the people moving together collectively. And we all deserve that, and those days will come again. But if it doesn't just keep moving as the predictions are that we're hearing every day, and there becomes a mini episode where again you must be your own round dance partner, or you must be your own hall dance partner in your living room, then just know that you are not alone. Because our dances are ways of collectively gathering. There always is a spirit there. The ancestors are there. The spiritual helpers are there whenever we gather. And so even if we go back into many episodes where you have to be restricted, or you got to watch, carry that forward in a good way. And as we're coming to the close of the Power Hour, got a couple more minutes left, I also wanted to talk about that in our communities, we have tried to prepare places so our family members are cared for within our territories, within our communities. And I just ask for everybody listening that in this moment that you're living in this day, that you take a moment to just think of all our old people, the physical people that are being cared for in a community of people that deserve care. If you call it a care home, or if you call it a rest home, because many of our elders, that their life force is so long and strong, they need and they deserve loving care. So wherever the elders or the people that have lived many days, many winters are, that you send that thought out, that they are cared for with love. And we all have a role as we live through our own hoop of being a part of the living generation. And that role changes over time. When I was younger, and then as I moved through to other experiences, I was told, it's about 9 years ago now, or it'll be 10 pretty soon. One of the grandfathers told me, the hardest thing I had to learn was to sit back. And I think I finally figured that out. One, they didn't say, you got to learn this, you got to do that. That's another way of teaching. They spoke from their experience because they trusted that I would continue to honor those teachings that they were giving me, that I would pass them on. So if you're at the time of life where it is required that you take on a new role, maybe you now have more responsibility, maybe you have a family, maybe you've been elected somewhere, maybe you've been given through education the responsibility for many, many people. I trust you will move on in a good way. I have faith in our way of life and our principles of collective agreements, of spiritual solutions, and really a celebration that we were given life to live during this time. And I'm not saying, firecrackers came after colonization, but we have our own spin on them. So if we make it to July, and part of how you celebrate involves those, my res dogs won't like it, but you show your appreciation when you're able to gather again with people. And one of the things I look forward to, because it was so much of our social connection, respectful social connection among all genders and all people, was the shaking of hands, the greeting of people physically, with the shaking of hands, the touching of lips, the hugs. I miss those, and I'm looking forward to those again. And so whatever way you express yourself when you're able to gather again, I think what really carries the spirit of hope and reaffirming that we are moving forward is that you design your own unique celebration. And that during this episode, people figured out all the conditions that were get put before us, and the restrictions or the adaptations. I know quite a few people have learned to cook or revisited cooking, have time to cook. So I'm not saying you all have to do this, but I just think it would be like just so beautiful if we had a friendly competition of showing your best pandemic meal and the story that went behind that. And that would be a real sharing cross-culturally, intertribally, across indigenous communities of what Thanksgiving is. That when the act of eating together is a cause for celebration. And so as we end this Native Wellness Power Hour, I just want to thank the Noyce Foundation again, and to remind people that you can watch these or share these again on YouTube and across the different social platforms. But also that I really wish you well today, and for all the winters of your life that you're going to live through. So as we get prepared to end this winter and go into the spring, I wish you a good springtime. And I wish you a lot of luck and happiness on whatever the years, the days, the seconds that are coming to you on your life path. And I honor your wellness journey. So thank you for joining me today, and have a beautiful, beautiful day. And even though I can't see you, I feel like I could see you because I could feel you. Thank you for joining me today. Bye-bye.